The massive chamber floated in the void between stars, a structure so large that entire cities could fit inside its walls. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated sections, each area designed to accommodate their unique biology. The air processors worked overtime to maintain the various atmospheric requirements, creating invisible barriers between oxygen breathers, methane breathers, and those who needed no air at all. HFY Park stood in the human section, his gray suit looking plain compared to the elaborate garments worn by other delegates. He had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 12 years now. 12 long years of fighting for respect that never came. His face showed the weariness of countless debates, negotiations, and insults politely delivered in diplomatic language. Today's session concerned the proposed expansion of Council authority over military deployments. It was the same discussion they had been having for months, dressed up in new words. The Council wanted more control over human forces while offering nothing in return. The human delegation requests recognition, HFY said, his voice calm and measured. The translation devices embedded in the chamber walls carried his words to every species in their own language. Theros, Vin. The elderly Valkorian representative made a gesture that his species used to show mild annoyance. His skin was deep purple, marked with the silver patterns that denoted high status among his kind. The Valkorians had been part of the Council for over 3,000 years. They viewed themselves as the natural leaders of galactic civilization. The Council recognizes Ambassador Park, Theros said, his tone making it clear this was a formality he would rather skip. Humanity again requests consideration for a permanent council seat, HFY began. He had given this speech so many times he could recite it in his sleep. Humans have served this council faithfully for 73 years. Our military forces constitute 87% of all active combat personnel defending council space. In the last decade alone, over 2 million human soldiers have died, protecting worlds that are not our own. He paused, letting the number sink in. 2 million. That was more than the total military personnel of the next 10 species combined. We have earned the right to participate fully in the decisions that send our people to die, HFY continued. We ask only for the respect that our service has purchased with blood. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then Loris Then, the Deshan delegate, activated his speaking privileges. The Deshans were thin, tall beings who prided themselves on their bureaucratic efficiency. Their civilization ran on rules, procedures, and proper channels. The human petition has been reviewed, Loris said in his whistling voice. The Council recognizes humanity's military contributions. However, permanent council seats require a minimum of 500 years of membership. Humanity has been part of this council for only 73 years. Rules exist for important reasons. We cannot simply ignore them because one species is impatient. Impatient? HFY felt anger rising but kept his voice level. 2 million dead is not impatience. It is sacrifice. It is service. It is everything you ask of us, while you sit safely behind our shields. Theros Vin rose from his seat, a gesture that commanded attention in Valkorian culture. Ambassador Park, your emotion is understandable, but misplaced. Humanity is indeed valuable to the Council. You excel at certain tasks that require your particular talents. Violence comes naturally to your species. This is not an insult, but an observation. Just as the Thessians excel at administration, and my people excel at cultural development. Humans excel at warfare. The Valkorian's words hung in the air like poison gas. You are our sword, Theros continued. And a valuable sword you are? But we do not ask swords to make decisions about governance. We ask them to cut when pointed in the right direction. Continue doing what you do best, and leave the complex matters of leadership to species with more experience in such things. Several other delegates made sounds of agreement. The Karathi clicked their mandibles in approval. The Shental hummed in harmony. They all saw humans the same way, useful barbarians who were good at fighting and little else. HFY looked around the chamber at the faces, scales and features of species who called themselves civilized. These were the people humanity had bled for. These were the world's human sons and daughters had died defending. and not one of them saw humans as equals. They saw tools, weapons, guard dogs that should be grateful for table scraps. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small data tablet. It was already connected to Earth's government through quantum, communication, secure, instant. He had hoped he would not need to use it today. The conversation with Prime Minister Hai-Jin Choi lasted less than 30 seconds. She asked one question. He gave one answer. She made one decision. Ji-ho put the tablet away and looked at Theros Vin. The old Velkorian was still speaking, explaining why younger species needed to be patient and understand their place in the galactic order. "Excuse me," Ji-ho said, his voice cutting through Theros' speech. "I need to make an announcement." "You are out of order, Ambassador," Loris then protested. "The speaking schedule does not." "I resign," Ji-ho said simply. "Effective immediately, I am no longer Earth's ambassador to this council." Effective immediately, Earth withdraws from the Galactic Council entirely. All human representatives will be recalled. All human military forces will be withdrawn from Council space. All agreements, treaties, and contracts between Earth and the Council are hereby terminated. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted in 47 different languages. Translation systems struggled to keep up with the noise. Alarms sounded as security. Systems interpreted the sudden movement in elevated voices as a potential threat. Theros Vin was laughing. The sound was deep and rumbling, amused rather than concerned. "This is childish, Ambassador. You cannot simply leave because your feelings are hurt. You will be back within months, begging for readmission. Where else will humanity find purpose? What else will you do besides fight for others?" Ji-ho gathered his few personal belongings from the human section. A photo of his family, a small stone from Earth, a medal given to him by a human soldier who had died on a Veshan colony world. "You will find out," Ji-ho said quietly. "We all will." He walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet chamber. Behind him, the council members began to recover from their shock. They started talking among themselves, analyzing, debating, and predicting. Most agreed that humanity would return soon. They always did. Species needed the council more than the council needed any individual species. Theros Vin was already discussing how to divide up the human military contracts among other species. Perhaps the Korathi could be convinced to expand their forces. Yes, they would need to hire more soldiers. But that was manageable. As Ji-ho's ship detached from the council chamber and began its journey back to Earth, he allowed himself a small smile. They still did not understand. They thought humans needed the council. They thought humans fought because the council gave them purpose. They were about to learn a very expensive lesson about what happens when you mistake tolerance for weakness. In service for need, the galaxy was about to change in ways the council could not yet imagine. Prime Minister Hai-Jin Choi stood in the Situation Room deep beneath Geneva, watching screens that showed human military positions across the galaxy. Each blue dot represented a ship, a base, or a unit. There were thousands of them scattered across council space, forming a protective net that had kept the peace for decades. "Begin Operation Homeward," she said quietly. The military officers around her began issuing orders. Across light years of space, human commanders received the same message. "Come home, bring everyone. Leave nothing behind." Commander Taeyong-im was aboard the destroyer Incheon when the order came through. His battle group was stationed at the Korathi border, watching for incursions from the Kryn swarm. The insectoid Kryn had been testing council defenses for years. Taeyang had been doing this job for 8 years. He knew every tactic the Kryn used. "We are receiving priority orders from Earth's command," its communications officer reported. Tay read the message 3 times to make sure he understood it correctly. "Navigation, plot a course for Sol System, maximum sustainable speed. We leave in 2 hours, sir." "What about the Korathi colonies?" his first officer asked. "If we leave, there is nothing between them and the swarm." "That is no longer our problem," Taeyong said, though the words felt strange in his mouth. He had lost friends defending those colonies. "Inform the Korathi defense coordinator that we are withdrawing. They have 2 hours to make arrangements." The Karathi coordinator, a beetle-like being named Tresh, appeared on the view screen 30 minutes later. His antennae were vibrating with distress. "You cannot leave." "Our agreement was with the Galactic Council," Taeyang interrupted. "Earth is no longer part of the Council. We are going home. But the swarm will attack the moment you leave. We do not have ships that can stop them. You know this." Taeyang did know this. The Karathi had 6 patrol boats. The human battle group had 32 warships, including 3 carriers. Without human protection, the Karathi border colonies would fall within days. "I suggest you request emergency assistance from the Council," Taeyang said. "Perhaps the Velkorians will send help." He cut the connection before Tresh could respond. It was easier that way. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Human evacuation convoys formed at every major base and outpost. Civilian contractors, engineers, medical personnel, and military forces all received the same instruction. Pack essential items only. Everything else stays on the Veshan trade hub of Centel Prime. Human technicians began shutting down the systems they had been maintaining. The station's power grid was a mess of incompatible technologies that only humans had been patient enough to keep running. The Thessians had always been happy to let humans handle the difficult technical work. "You cannot just turn everything off," the Thessian station master protested. "The fusion regulators need constant monitoring, and I suggest you learn how to monitor them," the human chief engineer replied. "I am leaving detailed instructions in the system. Good luck." The trade routes felt the impact within days. Human merchant ships had carried 70% of all cargo moving through Council space. They were faster, more reliable, and cheaper than alternatives. When they all turned around and headed for human territory, the galactic economy began to sputter. Shipping prices tripled overnight. Delivery times quadrupled. Goods that had been abundant became scarce. The Council had not realized how dependent they were on human logistics until the humans simply stopped providing it. But the real crisis came at the borders. The Kryn swarm attacked the Karathi colonies exactly as predicted. Thousands of organic ships poured across the border, overwhelming the tiny Karathi defense force and ours. Desperate calls for help went out to the Council. The Velkorian fleet responded first. 12 warships arrived at the embattled colony of Kresh for 3 days after the attack began. They found a nightmare. The Velkorian ships were beautiful, elegant designs. It looked like works of art. They were fast and maneuverable. They had been expensive to build. They had never actually fought a real battle. The Kryn swarm tore them apart in 20 minutes. Only 2 Velkorian ships escaped to report what happened. The Velkorian military had spent centuries focused on ceremony and display. Their weapons were outdated. Their tactics were theoretical. Their crews had trained in simulators that bore no resemblance to actual combat. Humans had been fighting the real battles for so long that other species had forgotten how. The Sessions tried next. They sent a force of 40 ships to reinforce the crumbling border. Thessian doctrine emphasized proper formation and adherence to established procedures. The Kryn did not follow established procedures. The Veshan fleet was routed within an hour. Emergency council sessions became daily events. Delegates shouted at each other, demanding solutions while offering none. The species that had spent decades criticizing human aggression suddenly realized they had no aggression of their own to draw upon. "We must negotiate with Earth," Loris then finally admitted. "Swallow our pride and bring them back."
Oh.
"They will return on their own," Theros Ven insisted. "Once they realize they cannot survive without council, trade, and support." Give it time. Time was not on the council's side. Within 6 months, the Kryn swarm had conquered 17 colony worlds. Billions of refugees fled deeper into council space, overwhelming stations and settlements that had no infrastructure to handle them. Disease spread through the refugee camps. Food shortages became common. The galactic economy was in free fall. Meanwhile, human space was quiet. The human border remained secure behind a wall of military might that no enemy dared test. Inside that border, life continued normally. Human trade flourished. Human colonies expanded. Reports from human territory described peace and prosperity. The contrast was obvious to anyone paying attention. Dr. Mingy Kong was one of the few humans who had chosen to remain outside human space. She was a xenobiologist working on a neutral research station, studying deep space organisms. She was not military. She was not political. She was a scientist who loved her work, but she could not ignore what she saw. The research station had become a refugee center almost overnight. Thousands of beings from dozens of species crowded into facilities meant for hundreds. Medical supplies ran out. Food processors broke down. Mingy spent her days treating injuries and illnesses she was not trained for, using equipment that was never designed for such heavy use. Why do the humans not help us? A young Nessione asked her one day. The child was thin and scared, separated from her family in the chaos of evacuation. Mingy had no good answer. She sent reports to Earth describing the suffering she witnessed. She begged for assistance, for supplies, for anything. The responses were polite but firm. Human resources were for human space. The council had made its choice. She understood the reasoning. She even agreed with it intellectually. But watching children starve because their leaders had been too proud to value the people who protected them made her angry in ways she had never experienced before. Commander Taiyang Im read those same reports in his quarters aboard the Incheon. Now stationed in the Sol System's defense fleet, he recognized the colony names. He had defended those places. He knew the streets, the buildings, the people. Sir, long-range scans show Kryn forces moving toward the Theta sector, his tactical officer reported during a routine briefing. That is where the Valkorians have their primary shipyards. Taiyang pulled up the star charts. The Valkorians would lose those yards. They did not have the forces to defend them. And once the yards were gone, they would not be able to build new ships to replace their losses. The council was not just losing, it was dying, and Earth watched from behind secure borders. Silent and unmoved, the Thessian Compact lost its third colony in a single week when the Kryn swarm broke through the defensive line at Presto 7. The evacuation had been chaotic and incomplete. Nearly 2 million Thessians were left behind when the last transport ships fled the system. No one knew if they had survived. Loris then watched the reports from his office on the Usean homeworld. His hands shook as he read casualty estimates. The numbers kept growing. 3 colonies gone. 15 billion credits in infrastructure destroyed. 4 million confirmed dead, with millions more missing. His communication panel lit up with an incoming call. It was Theros Vin. The Valkorian elder looked different than he had 6 months ago. The silver patterns on his purple skin seemed faded. His eyes carried a weight that had not been there before. The Valkorian shipyards are gone, Theros said without preamble. The Kryn destroyed them completely. We lost 40,000 workers when the stations fell. Loris closed his eyes. Those shipyards had been the pride of the Valkorian Empire. Massive orbital constructs that had built ships for 1,000 years. How many vessels did you lose trying to defend them? All of them, Theros replied quietly. We sent everything we had. The Kryn cut through our fleet like it was not even there. Our tactics, our weapons, our training, none of it mattered. We've been playing at war for so long that we forgot what real war looks like. The silence stretched between them. These were leaders of civilizations that measured their histories in millennia. They had thought themselves wise and experienced. They had looked down on humanity as crude. Newcomers who did not understand the subtle complexities of galactic governance. Now, their worlds were burning while humanity watched from safety. Council meets in 2 days, Laura said. We need to discuss the human situation. You mean we need to beg them to save us? Theros corrected. Say the words plainly. We were wrong. We need them. We always needed them. We were just too proud to admit it. The emergency council session was the most poorly attended in history. Several species had lost their homeworlds entirely. Others were too focused on survival to spare representatives for political meetings. Only 23 delegates appeared. Less than half the council's full membership, the chamber that had once seemed so grand, now felt empty and cold. We must send a formal delegation to Earth, Loris announced. We must request their return to the council and their assistance in repelling the current threats. On what terms? Asked Rethos Kane, a representative from the Ornoth Collective. They will demand concessions. They will want the permanent seat they asked for. They will want power. Then we give it to them, Theros said. Every eye in the chamber turned to him. The proud Valkorian elder who had dismissed humanity as mere warriors now advocated surrender. What use is power over ashes? What value is a council seat when there is no council left to sit on? We give them what they want, because the alternative is extinction. They abandoned us in our moment of need, someone protested. They are morally we abandoned them first, Theros interrupted, his voice sharp. For 70 years we used them. We sent them to die for our worlds, while treating them as inferior. We took their service for granted and mocked them when they asked for basic respect. They did not abandon us. They simply stopped letting us exploit them. The truth of his words settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. They had all been complicit. Every species that had accepted human protection while denying human equality shared the blame. I will lead the delegation, Theros continued. I will go to Earth. I will apologize. I will beg, if necessary. My pride cost my people their future. Let me try to repair some of the damage, while the council debated. The suffering continued. Dr. Mingi Kong worked 18-hour days at the refugee station, performing triage on beings from species she barely recognized. Medical supplies were almost gone. The food processors had failed completely. People were dying from treatable conditions because there were no treatments available. A Karathi child died in her arms from a simple infection that antibiotics would have cured. The child's name was Vesh. She was 6 years old. Her parents had been killed when the swarm attacked their colony. She had been alone and afraid in the chaos of the refugee center. Minji held the small body and cried. She had not cried since arriving at the station. She had forced herself to stay professional, to stay detached, to focus on helping who she could. But this was too much. She recorded another message to Earth that night. This one was different from her previous reports. She was not asking for supplies anymore. She was begging. She described Vesh in detail. She talked about the other children dying in the station. She pleaded for someone to care. The response came from Prime Minister Haijin Choi personally. It was brief. Dr. Kang, your reports break my heart. But Earth cannot save everyone. We can only protect our own. I know this seems cruel. History will judge whether we made the right choice. Come home if you wish. The offer is always open. But we will not send aid to the council that scorned us. Minji stared at the message for a long time. She understood the logic. She even agreed with it on some level. But understanding did not make it easier to watch children die. She stayed at the station. Someone had to help these people. If humans would not, then she would do what she could alone. News of the Valkorian shipyard's destruction spread quickly. It marked a turning point in galactic consciousness. The Valkorians had been the most powerful military force in the Council besides humanity. If they could fall so completely, no one was safe. Panic buying stripped markets bare. Governments hoarded resources. Species that had been allies for centuries began competing over increasingly scarce supplies. The careful civilization that the Council had built over thousands of years was unraveling in months. The Kryn swarm was not the only threat that emerged. Pirates, who had been held in check by human patrols, now operated freely. Raiders attacked shipping lanes and small colonies with impunity. Criminal organizations that had been suppressed for decades resurged. The galaxy had been peaceful, because humans had enforced that peace. Without them, old conflicts reignited. The Shentel and the Ornith had been rivals before joining the Council. Now they fought over mining rights and disputed systems. The fighting was brief, but bloody. Neither species had significant military experience. The battles were clumsy and inefficient. But people still died. Commander Taiyang Im watched intelligence reports of these conflicts with a mixture of sadness and vindication. He had served with both Shental and Ornoth officers during joint operations. They had been friends. Now they were killing each other over resources they could easily share. Sir, we are detecting a Kryn probe ship near the human border, his tactical officer reported. Taiyang pulled up the scan. A single Kryn scout testing their defenses. Lock weapons. Send a warning on all frequencies. If they cross the border, destroy them. The Kryn ship immediately turned away. The swarm was many things, but they were not stupid. They knew what happened when they challenged human ships. They focused their attention on easier prey. They are heading toward the Deshan sector, the tactical officer noted. Yes, Taiyang said quietly. They are. Theros Vin stood in his private chamber on the Velkorian homeworld, looking at images of the destroyed shipyards. 40,000 people had died there. Most of them had been young, working their first jobs, excited to be part of their civilization's proud military tradition. He had gotten them killed with his arrogance. He had called humans a sword, a tool, something that cuts when pointed in the right direction. He had been so certain of his wisdom, so confident in his civilization's superiority. Now, his civilization was dying, and the humans he had dismissed were thriving. His assistant entered the room. The Earth's delegation will see you in 2 days. They have granted permission for you and 5 others to enter human space. Only 6? Theros asked. I requested 12. They said 6 is more than we deserve. Those were their exact words. Theros smiled bitterly. They were right. 6 was generous. 1 would have been more than they deserved. He began preparing for the journey to Earth to face the people he had wronged. To beg for mercy, his civilization had never shown them. The council delegation's ship was stopped at the human border by a full battle group. 6 warships surrounded the small diplomatic vessel, weapons charged and shields up. It was a clear message. You enter human space only because we allow it. Theros Vin sat in the passenger compartment with the other delegates. Loris Then was there, representing the Veshan Compact. Rithos Kane spoke for the Ornoth. 3 others represented smaller civilizations that had suffered heavy losses in recent months. They all looked tired. Attention, Council Vessel, a human voice came over the communication system. You are cleared to proceed to Earth. Do not deviate from the assigned flight path. Do not activate any scanning equipment. Do not transmit any signals without permission. Any violation will result in your immediate destruction. Acknowledge. We acknowledge, Loris responded, his voice tight with suppressed anger at being addressed like criminals. Then welcome to human space, the voice said without warmth. The journey to Earth took 3 days. The delegation spent that time reviewing their proposal, arguing over terms, and trying to prepare for every possible scenario. But they all knew the truth. They had no leverage. They could only offer what humans demanded and hope it was enough. Earth looked beautiful from orbit. Blue and white and green, alive in ways that many council worlds were not. Human ships moved in organized patterns around the planet. A defensive network that seemed excessive until you remembered that these same humans had protected half the galaxy with similar networks. A shuttle brought them down to New Geneva, the diplomatic capital. As they descended, Theros looked out the window at the city below. It was smaller than the great Velkorian cities, less ornate than Veshan architectural achievements. But it was intact, whole, safe. The people below lived without fear of invasion. The contrast with council space was painful. They were brought to a conference room in a building. That was deliberately plain and functional. No grand chamber here. No floating seats or atmospheric processors. Just a simple room with a table and chairs. Another message. You do not get ceremony. You get business. Prime Minister Haejin Choi entered with 3 others. Ambassador Jiho Park was among them, looking healthier than when he had left the council chamber a year ago. The stress lines on his face had eased somewhat. The third person was a military officer in uniform, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense bearing. Her name badge read, Captain Duan Lee. Thank you for seeing us, Theros began. He had practiced this speech. We come to discuss we know why you are here, Haejin interrupted. You want us to save you? You want human soldiers to die for council worlds again? You want our ships, our weapons, our protection. Let us skip the diplomatic pleasantries and discuss what you are actually offering." Her bluntness was shocking. This was not how high-level negotiations were conducted, but these were not normal circumstances. Loris cleared his throat. "The Council is prepared to offer humanity a permanent seat with full voting rights. We can discuss trade concessions and technology sharing. We recognize that our previous treatment of humanity was unfair." "Unfair," Jiho repeated quietly. "That is an interesting word choice." Captain Doyen Lee placed a datapad on the table. "These are casualty figures from human military operations over the past 70 years. 2.4 million dead. 8.1 million wounded. All of them died or were injured protecting Council territory. In exchange, we received trade agreements that favored Council species, cultural exchange programs that treated us like curiosities, and constant reminders that we were too young and too aggressive to deserve real respect." She looked at each Council delegate in turn. "You did not treat us unfairly. You exploited us." "There is a difference," Esthero said, surprising everyone. "You are correct. We exploited you. We used you. We sent you to die while treating you as inferior. I personally insulted your entire species in an official Council session. I called you a sword and implied you were too simple for real leadership." He stood, his old joints protesting the movement. In Valkorian culture, standing was a sign of deep respect, something usually reserved for elders addressing those they honored. I was wrong. My civilization is paying the price for my arrogance and the arrogance of those like me. 40,000 Valkorians died at our shipyards because we did not know how to defend them. We had let you do our fighting for so long that we forgot how. I offer you the apology you deserve, though I know words cannot repair the damage done." The room was silent. This was not what the humans had expected. "That is a start," Hyjin said finally. "But apologies do not restore the dead or prevent future exploitation. If we return to the Council, it will be on our terms, not yours. Not the Council's, ours." "Name them," Rithos said. "We are not in a position to negotiate." Hyjin glanced at Jiho, who nodded. They had discussed this extensively before the meeting. "First, humanity receives a permanent Council seat with veto power over any decision that would deploy human military forces. You do not get to vote to send our people to die. Only we make that decision." The delegates nodded. They had expected this. "Second, all human colony worlds and territories gain complete sovereignty. No Council laws or regulations apply to human space without explicit human agreement." More nods. This was also predictable. "Third, full and public apologies from every Council member species. Not private statements. Public broadcasts acknowledging how humanity was treated and accepting responsibility for that treatment." Loris shifted uncomfortably. That could be politically difficult. "Some governments might resist, then they can burn," Doyon said flatly. "This is not negotiable. You want our help, you admit what you did wrong. Publicly." "Fourth," Hyjin continued, "reparations. Not money. We want full access to Council's scientific databases. Unrestricted rights to settle on any unclaimed worlds within Council space. And priority trading status at all Council ports." "That is substantial," Rithos noted. "So is 2.4 million dead," Jiho replied. "Fifth," Hyjin said, and this is the most important term. "Any species that wishes to receive human military protection must contribute to that protection. We will not be your unpaid army anymore. Either you train your own forces to fight alongside ours, or you pay for human protection in resources, technology, or territory. You want us to build armies?" Loris asked. "Many Council species have not maintained significant military forces for centuries." "Then you should start," Doyon said. "We will provide training. We will share tactics and weapons technology. But you need skin in the game. Your people need to bleed alongside ours. Otherwise, you will never value the cost of the peace we provide." "That is 5 terms," Theros said. "Are there more?" "Just one," Hyjin replied. "This is a trial period. 5 years. If at any point we feel the Council is slipping back into old patterns, if we see signs of exploitation or disrespect, we leave again, permanently. There will be no third chance. The Council delegates looked at each other. These terms were harsh. They would face political backlash at home. Some governments might refuse, but the alternative was extinction. I can agree to these terms on behalf of the Valkorian Empire, Theros said. Athe Tessian Compact accepts, Loris added, one by one. The other delegates voiced their agreement. We will need to present this to the full council, Rethos said, but I believe it will pass. The situation is desperate enough that even the proud species will swallow their objections. You have 1 week, Hyjin told them. Get full council approval and begin implementing the terms. If we see real commitment to change, we will start redeploying our forces to critical areas. What about the Kryn swarm? Loris asked. They are advancing deeper into Veshan territory every day. Doyon pulled up a tactical display. We have been monitoring the situation. The swarm is overextended. They have conquered territory faster than they can properly secure it. If we hit them with a coordinated strike here, here, and here, we can fracture their supply lines and force a retreat. She looked at the council delegates. But we are not doing that until the council agrees to our terms. You created this situation through your arrogance. You can live with the consequences a little longer, while you decide if your pride is worth more than your survival. The meeting ended shortly after. The council delegates returned to their ship in silence. They had come hoping to negotiate from some position of strength, to find a compromise that allowed them to maintain dignity. Instead, they had been given an ultimatum and forced to accept it, as their ship left Earth orbit. Theros watched the planet recede in the view screen. They have changed, he said to Loris. A year ago, they would have helped us out of compassion, even after how we treated them. Now they are harder, colder. We did that, Loris replied. We taught them that kindness and service bring only exploitation. We taught them to value themselves more than they value us. This is what we created. Back in the conference room, Jiho watched the council ship disappear from the monitors. Do you think they will actually change? He asked Hyjin. Some will, she replied. Some will not. But that is not our problem anymore. We are done carrying the galaxy on our backs. From now on, they stand on their own feet, or they fall. It is time they learn to walk. She turned to Doyon. Start preparing the battle plans. We will honor the agreement if they do. But keep our primary forces close to home. We protect ourselves first. Always. The reformed Galactic Council chamber looked smaller than before. Only 32 species remained as active members. 15 civilizations had collapsed entirely during the crisis. The grand floating structure had been damaged in a pirate raid and hastily repaired. It no longer gleamed with the same pride it once had. Ambassador Soman Young stood in the human section, which was now positioned at the center of the chamber rather than off to the side. She was young, only 32, but she had been chosen specifically for this role. The old guard of human diplomats, people like Jiho Park, had done their service. Now it was time for a new generation to represent Earth. Saman had watched recordings of her predecessor's final speech to the council. She had studied every insult, every dismissal, every moment of casual disrespect that humans had endured. She would not forget. More importantly, she would not let the council forget. The council is now in session, Loris then announced. The Thession had retained his position as council administrator, though he looked years older than he had 2 years ago. We begin with military reports from the Joint Human Council operations against the Kryn swarm. General Wan Hobik appeared on the main display. He was broadcasting from the human carrier Sol, currently stationed at the former Kryn front line. The front line that was no longer advancing? The swarm has been pushed back to its original borders, Wanho reported. We have reclaimed 14 colony worlds and destroyed over 60% of their military capacity. Losses were minimal because this time we had proper support from Council forces. He pulled up tactical displays showing the battles. I want to specifically recognize the Veshan 4th Fleet under Commander Brio Senth. They held the line at Presto 7 for 6 hours against overwhelming odds, giving us time to bring in reinforcements. 18 Deshan ships were lost, but their sacrifice saved millions of lives. There was respectful silence in the chamber. The Vessians had learned to fight. It had cost them dearly in lives and resources, but they had learned. They were no longer helpless. The Ornith Rapid Response teams performed exceptionally well in boarding actions, Wanho continued. Their physiology gives them advantages in close combat that we are incorporating into joint tactical doctrine. And the Valkorian stealth ships proved invaluable for reconnaissance. Theros Vin, still serving as Valkorian representative despite his age, listened carefully. His people had rebuilt their military from scratch, learning from humans and finding their own strengths. They would never again be the dominant force they once were, but they were competent. That was enough. What are swarm losses? Rethos Kane asked. Catastrophic, Wanho replied with satisfaction. They are suing for peace. Our terms are simple. They return all territory taken during their expansion. They submit to regular inspections to ensure they are not rebuilding their military capacity. And they pay reparations to the species they attacked. And if they refuse? Salman asked. Then we finish what they started, Wanho said bluntly. We have the forces positioned to eliminate the swarm entirely if necessary. The choice is theirs. The swarm chose peace. They had learned the same lesson the council had learned. Humans were terrifying when properly motivated. After the military briefing, the council moved to other matters. Reconstruction efforts, trade agreements, border disputes, the normal business of galactic governance. But it was different now. Human representatives had input on every decision. More importantly, they had veto power. The council could not simply vote to do whatever benefited them and expect humans to make it work. They had to convince humans it was worth doing. Next item, Laura said. The Shentel are requesting human engineering support to rebuild their orbital stations. Denied, Salman said immediately. The Shentel representative made a sound of distress, but the stations are critical infrastructure. Without them, you will be inconvenienced, Salman interrupted. We have provided you with technical documentation. We have offered training for your own engineers. We are not sending human crews to do work you can do yourselves. It would take us years to learn what human engineers already know. You should have started learning years ago instead of expecting us to do. Everything for you, Salman replied calmly. Next item. This was the new reality. Humans would help, but only when the help was actually needed. Simple laziness or unwillingness to learn was no longer sufficient reason to expect human labor. After the session, Salman met with Jiho Park in a private room. The old ambassador had officially retired but still advised the human delegation. You were harsh with the Shentel, Jiho observed. They need to learn self-reliance, Salman replied. If we do everything for them, we become their servants again. Just with better titles. True, but be careful not to become what they were to us. Arrogant, dismissive. Salman considered this. It is a balance. We need to be firm enough that they respect us, but not so harsh that we create resentment. Yes, and remember, some of them are trying. The Veshans have lost thousands learning to defend themselves. The Valkorians have humbled themselves in ways their culture finds deeply painful. Not everyone in the council was equally guilty. I know, Salman said softly. I watched Theros Vin's public apology. He cried when he described the human soldiers who died defending Valkorian colonies. That took courage. Across the galaxy. Dr. Minji Kong was still at the refugee station, but it looked very different now. Human aid had arrived once the council agreed to Earth's terms. Food, medicine, and supplies flowed steadily. The dying had stopped. More importantly, the refugees were being resettled. Species were reclaiming their worlds from the Kryn. Families were being reunited. The crisis was ending. A young Nessian girl approached Minji one day. Her name was Thesa. She was one of the children Minji had treated during the darkest days. Dr. Kong, I wanted to say goodbye, Thesa said in halting human language. She was learning it in school now. My family is going home to Presto 7. They say the colony is being rebuilt. That is wonderful, Minji replied. I am so happy for you. Why did you stay? Thesa asked. When the other humans left, why did you stay and help us? Mingy thought about how to answer. Because someone had to. And because I believe in helping people who need help. Even when it is hard. Even when others tell me not to. The other children say humans are heroes. That you saved us all. We are not heroes, Mingy said gently. We are just people. People who decided we had value and deserved respect. Remember that, Thesa. When you grow up, treat others with respect. Do not take anyone for granted. Learn from what happened here. Commander Taeyong-im stood on the bridge of the Incheon, watching a joint fleet exercise. Human ships moved in coordination with Thessian, Ornith, and Velkorian vessels. The formations were clean and professional. The communication was clear and respectful. Sir, the Velkorian commander is requesting permission to attempt the advanced pincer maneuver. His tactical officer reported. Granted. Let us see how they do. The Velkorian ships executed the maneuver reasonably well. Not perfect, but competent. They were learning. Send them a commendation, Taeyong ordered. And note the areas where they can improve in the after-action report. His first officer smiled. You are getting soft, Commander. A year ago, you would have let them fail without comment. A year ago, they deserved to fail, Taeyong replied. Now they are trying. That earns them guidance instead of contempt. 2 years after the withdrawal, a ceremony was held on a neutral station at the border of human and council space. Representatives from every member species attended, along with thousands of observers. A monument was unveiled. It was simple but powerful. A wall of names. Every human who had died defending council territory over the 73 years of human membership. 2.4 million names, carved in stone that would last for millennia. Above the names. An inscription in every council language, the guardians who walked away. They served with honor. They deserved better. We will remember. Jiho Park attended the ceremony. He was old now, walking with a cane, but he insisted on being present. He stood before the wall, looking at names of people he had known. Friends, colleagues, young men and women who had believed they were building something worthwhile. Theros, Finn stood beside him. The Velkorian was even older, barely able to stand despite the assistance of his aides. Will they forgive us, do you think? Theros asked quietly. The dead. Will they forgive what we did? I do not know, Jiho replied honestly. But perhaps their children will. If we do better, we're doing better, Theros said. Look, he gestured to where human and Velkorian children played together near the monument. They were laughing, chasing each other, completely unaware of the history that had brought their people to this moment. The next generation will not remember the contempt, Theros continued. They will grow up seeing each other as equals. As friends, that is how we honor the dead, by making sure their sacrifice leads to something better. The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence. 2.4 million names. 2.4 million lives. 2.4 million reminders of the cost of taking people for granted. That evening, Ambassador Somin Yang returned to the human embassy. She found a message waiting for her. It was from a small colony on the edge of council space. It's a mixed settlement of humans and Oranath, who had decided to build something together. The message was simple. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for not giving up on us. We will do better. We promise. Somin smiled. There was still work to do. Still old prejudices to overcome. Still species that resented human authority. But there was also hope. Real hope for genuine partnership. She pulled up the personnel files for the next group of human officers being assigned to train council forces. They were all volunteers who believed in the mission. People like Wan Ho Beek and Doyen Lee, who understood that strength without purpose was empty. But strength paired with wisdom could build something lasting. The galaxy would never be perfect. There would always be conflicts and disagreements. But it would be better than it had been, because humans had learned to value themselves. And in learning that lesson, they had taught the Council to value them too. In the end, the story of humanity's withdrawal was not about revenge or superiority. It was about dignity. about the simple truth that those who protect you deserve respect. That service given should be honored, not exploited. That partnership means equality, not servitude. The galaxy had learned those lessons the hard way, but it had learned them. And in learning, it had become something better than it was. The stars still shone. The council still governed. But now, when humans walked through the chamber, others stood in respect. Not because they feared human weapons or needed human protection, but because they had finally learned what should have been obvious from the beginning: humans were equals. They always had been. It just took walking away to make everyone else see it.